And there were many days when actually I don't remember them. I don't remember what happened because I was so damn tired. And you reached a point where there was no beyond. You just could not go any further.
All I could see was men lying dead, men screaming, men on the barbed wire with the bowels hanging down, shrieking, and I thought, what can I do?
There were sheets and sheets in the paper of dead and wounded, photographs where they could get them of the men, and I personally was brought out of class to be told that my cousin had been killed.
People didn't seem to realise, you know, what a terrible thing war was. You couldn't convey, you know, the awful state of things. They just didn't understand it.
July the 1st, 1916. Jeremy Deller, when you were first approached by Jenny and said, create something, what was your first response?
Well, often when you're asked to do things like this, your mind goes entirely blank and you panic, and that happened. And then about a week later, I was cycling along Liverpool Road, and I thought, what would I like to see? What would I like to see someone else do? And then I thought, quite simply, I would like to see something that was mobile, involved human beings, moved around, had a randomness to it, was unexpected, was a secret, and was a way of taking the memorial to the public, rather than the public having to go to a place to be sad. It would be an intervention in their lives, and they weren't expecting it, and might not even be wanting it, but they would have to deal with it in some way. And the idea was there, and that's probably 95% of the idea as it stood, and there's a few additions, but really that was it.
Show some of you have some images that you can tell us.
Yes. Well, this is the initial thinking in a way. It was a way to describe it rather than write it. It was a way to just put these are just two images of how I thought it could look or it should look. So you have these are actually, you know, the black and white was obviously from 1916, and I just felt this is how it would look. But we didn't quite have that weather that day, unfortunately. But that's how it would have looked if we had had a bit of sun. And then so things like this, and it's more or less what we got. We didn't have the costumes in such a distressed state because I didn't really want them to be sort of narrative, really, have a narrative with them. But it was basically this quality I was looking for, these people to be amongst the public and to surprise the public and to look very different from them and be in contemporary spaces. And that's what we did. So this is a picture I took at Waterloo Station of one of the participants outside Pret-a-Manger. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted contemporary Britain to have these presences of these men around them.
And what a stark contrast, a man with his rifle and a man with his mobile phone.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's perfect, really, for me. That was what I was hoping for.
And Jenny, was that what you were hoping for?
Yes, what we were hoping for is, I suppose I have the kind of luckiest job of anyone on the panel, which is to invite artists to create original and extraordinary things that will connect people with the First World War and act as an emotional connection, I suppose. Not the history books, not the documentaries on telly, not the ceremonials that are happening throughout the centenary, but connect people in a different way to the First World War and really kind of, as you were saying, get us thinking. So when I invited Jeremy to have a bold and original and ambitious idea, I didn't quite expect it to be this scarily ambitious. But fortunately, introducing him to Rufus, and Rufus just kind of taking up the idea and I suppose throwing not just your weight behind it, but also the whole of the National Theatre, and then thinking actually this could be done by the theatres of this country, which are brilliant and incredible. And our role at 1480 now is to work with cultural organisations across the UK to deliver each of the projects. So getting the 3 national theatres, getting so many of the regional reps who do, the most amazing projects every night at 7:30 in all their theatres, but just get them to think in a completely different way and be led by a visual artist was scary and ambitious, but actually it was the group of organisations that could pull it off.
Rufus, you made history in telling history, in the sense it was the first time, I understand, as Jenny mentions, first time 3 national theatres worked together on one huge project, and then all the other local theatres which were brought together. She described it as scary. Is that the word you would use?
I don't know.
Challenging, certainly.
Yeah, challenging, but this place is, is amazing. I mean, last week in this theatre we had Connections Festival, and in the Olivier, that's 500 youth theatres and schools groups all over the country. These are networks that exist. In the house tonight, Porrig, who's just down to the right here, who was charged with bringing all these people together, knows every theatre and every theatre practitioner in the world, and the resource that's available here is incredible. I mean, I'm sure that's why Jenny came here first. And so it's not scary. No, it's about going, actually, are we gonna do it? And the fantastic thing about being here is you go, yes, we can. And then you just get on with it.
But it's one day across the whole country from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and so many people who they're not trained actors. And Emily, you had the job of working with many of these people who came in, and tell us a little bit about that process, because I understand it was even that side of it was awesome.
Yeah, so I suppose I was overseeing the different associate directors who were around the country and working in all the different theatres leading on the delivery of the project. And then Jeremy and I had the massive privilege of going and meeting all of the participants who'd been gathered together for the project and jumped on board, taking a big leap of faith because they knew very little about what they were signing up to when they first signed up. I think the only thing we gave them was a nationwide project, award-winning team, and not much else, was it? So meeting people, and we had also designed together the rehearsal, a sort of template rehearsal process that we felt would be a good way of coming to the performance language that we'd devised together. So it was a combination of seeing people in the room, communicating with the directors through emails and lots of documentation and phone calls and meetings and things like that, but helping to ensure consistency of Jeremy's vision across the board.
Because we were discussing earlier, it's like the men who stand in the searing heat, when there is searing heat, with those huge bear hats in front of Buckingham Palace and 10 Downing Street, and you go up and tease them, and they have to keep a straight face. And Rufus, I understand it was your idea that they should be silent.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the whole thing is a bit akin. I'm a director, so I'm an interpretative artist. Jeremy's a creative artist, so normally I'd have a script or something to work with, and Jeremy would come with this idea. So in a way, the job was to just interrogate that a little bit and try and, I think what Emily and I were doing, we're going, well, how about that? How about that? And Jeremy would guide it as we went through. We did a workshop in Birmingham 14 months ago or a year ago, and then another one in Salisbury, each time trying out a little idea, and Jeremy would all wander around. He's got such a keen eye that it was really, it worked very well, didn't it, in that sense? And Emily's got such a wealth of experience of working with people who aren't trained actors that it felt like a good trio. But they were amazingly responsive, weren't they?
They were, and I suppose the challenge was what we were asking them to do was very, very restrained and very subtle. And Jeremy sort of said right from the beginning, well, they need to just do nothing, which is all very well for an artist to say, but not a good instruction for a director to give. So we had to come up with some really clever ways of making sure that the participants always felt active. Le jeu was a really important part of that, I suppose. It's an exercise, an improvisational exercise, which is about responding to your environment and to the people around you. And so we spent a lot of time seeding that in. And I mean, the directors around the country were just brilliant, though, and they came up with lots of really clever ways of interpreting what we'd given them and finding out how what was going to make their particular group of participants respond. And I can tell you that what makes a farmer respond is different to what makes a student actor respond, which is different to what makes a flight attendant or a barman respond, and that's the joy of it. It was so amazing. But I should say as well, that we did often find that the people who had no training and no formal experience of the theatre were the ones that really stepped into it most naturally and most quickly, because the language was so gentle, and we weren't giving anyone a big monologue to say or a big character to play.
And it is an interesting reflection because, as you know, especially for the day, for the Battle of the Somme, a lot of them went to war as pals, as workmates, so they would have been on that day school friends, flight attendants, people from all different walks of life. So it actually was a genuine reenactment.
And they weren't professional soldiers either. And they were
exactly,
At that time there was conscription, not subscription, that's a theatre thing, conscription. But I think the other thing that came out of it at the end for the participants is that they had felt like they'd been in some sort of PALS battalion, that actually they said afterwards that they would have done anything for each other, that they had a way of communicating because they were completely silent. And obviously there was a very clever, brilliantly directed stage management system of when they moved and when they stopped and when they sang and so on. But that the participants had said that they had felt connected to each other and knew what to do next and how everyone was feeling.
Well, I think we should give a word to those who were part of it. Park, I think you have a microphone. I know we have here some of the soldiers who were on that day in uniform, not checking into pret-a-manger when someone wasn't looking. Tell you, what's your name?
My name's Peter. I had a card representing Rifleman George Edward Morris, who died at the age of 20 on that day.
And so how did it feel like? You've heard everyone here describing what it felt like. What did it feel like for you? You were the man on the spot.
Well, I'm a science teacher, so everything they've said about making it accessible to people who are not trained in acting was very definitely true. The language was very helpful. We did have some direction in terms of we had signals for whether we were going to stand together, spread out, stagger ourselves across a station, for example. I was in Waterloo. And it was just a very, very moving experience.
That's Waterloo, by the way. You're there somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you, yes.
I mean, did you really feel, once you put the uniform on, and you knew it was July the 1st, did you find you went completely into, tried to be in the sense of that day?
Well, we'd spent several weeks leading up to it, in which we'd been doing warm-up games and doing drill and encouraging each other through that. So it started off quite light-hearted, although, of course, we had a wonderful lecture, actually, on the Somme, to get us started. And then once we started giving cards out to members of the public and demanding a response from them by our presence, it really hit home what we were doing, and it was incredibly moving. And that's continued to this day. I had a message just this last weekend of a friend who on Twitter had a message from a historian posting a photo of the rifleman that he represented, and saying that she's now got in contact with the family and will be giving a photo of him on that day to the family.
And before this project, did you know much about July the 1st, what had happened at the Somme?
I had a great-grandfather who was involved in the First World War, and I didn't even know about it. So it made me find out a lot more about the battle. I knew very little.
How many of you, before July the 1st, 2016, thought a lot, knew a lot about what happened July the 1st, 1916, and on the Battle of the Somme? Just a show of hands, how many of you knew before? Quite a few of you. How many of you knew more after July the 1st, 2016?
Hands up, everyone, please.
Was anyone else a soldier on that day would like to say something? Okay.
Hello. Well, we were all part of the same group here.
Oh, how many of you are there?
There was three of us here.
Where were you?
We were at Euston in the morning, and then we travelled to Milton Keynes, and then we came back then to Waterloo. I represented a private Alexander Bell, who was, I believe, I'm not sure the exact regiment, but he was a Scotsman. What I really felt was great on the day was, I semi-expected it, but not to the level, was on the day of the real impact it had on the public. I was just saying to a friend of mine today, who's actually an ex-serviceman, and he was sort of asking me about the experience, and of course I had to be very secretive about the whole project. So finally he saw it on his television when he was up in Leeds, and he came down today and he was like absolutely blown away by the whole project. And I was telling him today about an example of, I was standing outside Euston Station, I believe, and I saw a lady across the road, and she'd already started breaking down into tears, and she was holding eye contact with me the whole time as I was with her, sharing this moment. And she came over to me and sort of asked, are you a Scotsman? And of course, it's very difficult not to respond to somebody when they're having that emotional connection with you. But at the same time, there still was a connection.
Did you respond? Because you were told to remain silent. What did you choose to do?
Well, at that point, I'd handed her the card and obviously sort of stayed with her. And as she read it, she looked up and sort of gave me a nod and sort of was a bit more teary and walked off. But I mean, that for me really summed up the whole experience. It was that being able to reach out to the public and being in a public space and putting a face on these men that a lot of us knew nothing about. And that was just an example. There was many of those different experiences throughout the day. And yeah, I mean, that was kind of one of the reasons that I got involved in. I think for many of us as well, we all had them stories to tell each other at the end of the day. So,
thank you very much.
It was really good.
Does any of you have any questions you'd like to ask any of these great minds behind you?
I was not expecting the reaction that the public gave us. We did all these training exercises of what if kids run after you, what if someone nicks your hat, what if someone takes the piss out of you, and all of this. And we were just, even on the Shetland Islands, they were worried about it. Probably a crime-free part of Britain. They spent ages talking about it. And then when it came to it, it probably happened a bit, but the reaction of the public really took.
Was really incident-free?
I think in Northern Ireland, in Derry, there's a few things said to people,
at the beginning, but
but not. I mean, it's not surprising.
No, I mean, and we went specifically. I was very keen, but we didn't ignore that part of the UK as well. I think it's very important that we went there, and it was always going to be different. But it was amazing for that reaction. I wasn't expecting it, and we were talking about it earlier. I suspect it was because we just had two of the most horrible weeks in British public life in a way, where people were willing to sacrifice their country for themselves or for their ego or vanity, and then you have this thing where people kind of sacrifice their lives for their country. So there's this total inversion of what we'd been through for the last 2 or 3 weeks, this sort of trauma almost, I would say. But it surprised me, and I mean, weirdly, originally I'd written in my book. Hopefully you'll thank me for saying this. I wrote in the notebook. I said I want to make children cry, because I just thought it would be quite interesting to not to frighten children as such, but sort of unsettle them. But we seem to make a lot of adults cry rather than children.
Do you realise Rufus has a contract which says, please don't make children cry?
Yeah, well, I know. But it was interesting. It took me by surprise.
Well, that's
but in a good way.
Part of art as well. Does anyone? We don't have microphones, but if you can speak loud, and I'll be your microphone if we can't hear it. This is the lady in the back. So did you feel that you were, as a woman, you couldn't relate because it was such a male?
Not relate. But just, I knew it wasn't an option I had to put on that uniform, and that's exactly what my time had been felt as well.
Oh, interesting.
So that was really interesting. But I wondered if you had if that had been part of the sort of thought process to begin with, or whether you thought.
Do you want to talk about?
So yes. So a question then from a woman. What is your name? Sarah, from Sarah, who approaches, of course, 1916, women were not serving in the army. Interesting that there's just been a decision to allow women to serve in close combat roles. How does a woman engage with this kind of performance art when it was so male, and of course it's about war, and you found a hard time, but in a sense she put herself in the shoes of the women of the time, some of whom may have wanted to serve. Jenny, because I know we talked a little bit about.
Well, we did have that discussion. In fact, the Birmingham test day that you mentioned, Rufus, had young men and women in Second World War uniform. We didn't want to kind of break the secret at that early stage, but it was a very interesting discussion that we had with a number of theatre directors from around the country, and Jeremy and you, Rufus and Emily, about whether to include women participants as well as men.
But I think in answer to your question, I don't think it was part of it feels like the decision to not have women was very clearly just because it didn't it didn't suit the vision, did it? Unfortunately, the women in uniform looked like women in uniform, and the public responses, it was really important to test, and the public responses were unfortunately quite negative, and there was quite a lot of Larry response, and some people got followed a little bit, and it just wasn't saying the right thing. And so I think it wasn't so much that you'd hoped that women would receive it that way, although that's a really interesting, beautiful way that you came to it as a woman, but it was more practical than that. Would you agree, Jeremy?
Yeah.
I think?
I mean, yes, it just wasn't going to work, unfortunately. But when I was researching the project, there was this huge phenomenon of women seeing their dead loved ones in the streets of major cities mainly, out the corner of their eyes. So in a way, it's kind of inspired by the responses of women often seeing their husband or their brother or their son. And this was a huge thing, and it led people onto spiritualist churches and seances where they would be often sort of totally ripped off by unscrupulous people, saying that they could contact these people who they had visions of, basically. So that was a very strong part of the idea, really, for this sort of presence on the streets. But they weren't playing ghosts. I know that word has been used a lot in the press, but there's nothing you can do about that. They weren't ghosts. They weren't zombies or anything like that.
Yeah. But I suppose that was the power. They were real, breathing human beings, and that was the greatness of it, I think. That. Okay, another question? Yes? The gentleman?
Yes, I think firstly we should congratulate everybody here who was involved in that day. I was hugely moved and impressed by it.
Congratulations to everyone that's involved. I think it means all of us. Well done, all.
My question to Rufus and to Jeremy is, now that you've done this installation I did, has it been done, or do you think you could do it again to commemorate another World Adventure anniversary? And as a footnote, Jeremy, you mentioned politics. We've been living through the most tumultuous month in British politics ever. Rufus, is there a play in this, do you think?
Okay. So a question, let's go to you, Rufus, first, whether or not you think this could be, it had such an impact. Could you do it again? And then I'll go to you. Could you, Jeremy? Yeah.
I'm gonna respond on behalf of the award-winning artist, Jeremy Deller. I think you'll find he never does anything twice. So the simple answer is, would you do this again for another historical event? No, you wouldn't do that. I don't know. I don't suppose you would. In terms of...
Because you want surprise, right? It has to be, otherwise it becomes too predictable, and then...
Well, the secrecy thing was massively important.
Because everyone was taken by it, and
In terms of, is there a play about this moment in our political history? There'll be loads.
Yeah.
The thing is that you can't... Generally speaking, no, the dust has to settle a lot more before people can really... I mean, we're on the set of a play that is about Greece in response to the coup d'état. It's set in most of it in the 70s. So that sometimes it takes a long time to look back on things. What I think the legacy of this will be for this theatre, in a way, and interestingly, in a broader context, Emily is a fantastic community theatre director, and one of the reasons that she's come on board and is with us for the next couple of years is to kind of spearhead a part of theatrical performance work that this theatre hasn't done much of in the past, together with Flo, who's here at the moment, and our fantastic learning department. It is an area that we're very, very keen to engage in more, and we're I'm not going to talk about it in any detail, but we're getting involved in quite a big response, I think, in a very, very different way to what's going on politically now, more on the kind of community theatre front. But I don't, the plays, the brilliant plays that are written about this period of time, I suspect will be written after I've been booted out of here. But I don't know, over to, what do you think?
I think theatre's very good at reacting to current events or recent history, better than arts almost, I would say. But I wouldn't do it again. But I'm happy for people to do something similar again. I would say, and we actually, I don't know if I can say, someone in New Zealand asked if they could do something similar for a commemoration of a battle there, and I'm just let them get on with it, basically. Just, if there's an idea,
you're going to do a new thing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be bothered really administering this idea. I just want to get on with something else. But I'm quite happy.
Yours now, Jenny. Thank you for the good, very good. You couldn't do a theatre based on what's happening now because no one would believe it. They'd say the plot is too fantastic. Yes.
Oh, question.
I'm interested in the online social reach of the project. Was that planned, and have you been measuring that? I did one little post and it was shared all around the world. Comments, 50,000, 70,000 odd comments. Wow. People moved in Barbados, Canada, New Zealand, all over the place. Sharing, commenting on that. But I guess the other question is, I'm interested in how you came to decide that each of the participants represented an individual soldier who died that day, and were the participants thinking about that person? Because I'm fascinated by the card that I received.
Okay.
It would have been great to enter that name into a website and find information about it, but online historians have posted on my thread information and all.
Well, thank you. The project lives on through your own social media interaction. I wonder, was it this question for you, Jenny? Was it part of the original idea, or with Jeremy, that it would have this ripple effect? The question was, of course, about whether the response, which continues to resonate.
It was absolutely part of your idea. I mean, Jeremy's idea was that no one would know about it until it happened, and then everyone would know about it. And so we had a very unusual marketing brief for an incredible team, some of whom are here today. So to answer your question, the social media reach has been phenomenal. We set ourselves a kind of target of reaching 65 million impressions on social media. I think at the moment it's at 220 million impressions and growing. There's a little film on the BBC Arts Online which has had about 1.8 million views. I think we did some YouGov polling last week, and 63% of the population, 63% of the adult population of the UK are aware of We Are Here, and were aware of it either live, 2 million, or 30 million of them through media and social media. So the plan was to have, the National Theatre again gave us an extraordinary room somewhere in the depths of somewhere here, which we called the control room, which I thought was quite kind of appropriate. We should have called it the command and control room, probably. And there was a team on social media which was getting the story out, and there was a team on social media which was stopping anything that could possibly tell anyone that it was an artwork. So anyone who mentioned Jeremy's name, anyone who mentioned the National Theatre, Birmingham Rep, anything, Erica, who's here in the room, managed to get hold of people, and so did Kathy and the whole of the team, to just take down any post that would give the game away, so that when people encountered a soldier, they didn't immediately think, oh, that's the artwork that everyone's talking about. They thought, oh, someone said something about a soldier, and now I'm seeing it, and now I'm going to take a photograph and share it. So there was an online life for it, which has continued for, well, the last week and a half.
And who, Jeremy, was your idea that they would hold the card? Because Rufus, if I'm correct, was the silence, but the cards, where did that come from? Was that in discussions with you?
I always thought there should be a card. People should be given something. It's like a gift.
Because we heard an interesting example of someone who you want to say something to them, and the card becomes a very powerful way to communicate.
It's basically like a gravestone.
Yeah.
On a card, in a sense. We didn't realise it. But when you look at it, you think, oh, it's all the information you'd see on a gravestone. And they were just giving those out, and that was, again, it's had this random quality to it. We do have someone here who could tell you about the names. Is Anna. Is Anna here?
Anna? Okay.
Anna was costume, but also researched the names, and she could tell you how she went about it.
Yeah.
How many names altogether?
1,500 names. So, yeah, I was, along with Helen, one of the costume supervisors for the whole project. So I was responsible for the uniforms, but I also, because of the differences between the uniforms based on regiments, based on battalions, ended up with this job of finding 1,500 names of all of these soldiers. And you were saying that it would be good to put the name into a website. That's absolutely something you can do. I went through, sort of supported by the Imperial War Museum, went through a website called the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which has compiled all of the data of all of the graves of all of the soldiers that we know about from the First and Second World War. And came at it from that angle and spent a long time looking at the regiments that were there on the first day of the Somme and then finding all of the war dead from every regiment that we'd selected, which were from all around the country, so that the idea was that a lot of the soldiers would be geographically appropriate for the men who died, so the participants had names of people who were from the area that they were in. Yeah.
Very good. Well, that's an amazing job she did, I have to say.
No.
Phenomenal.
Yes,
Phenomenal.
yeah.
My question's about politics. I was thinking, I've just come from the conceptual art show at Tate Britain, and maybe keeping in mind Chilcot Inquiry too. And what really came to me is you're looking at work from the late 70s, and there was like a few selection of artists who were making exceptionally argumentative political work, whether it was against what was happening in Northern Ireland or issues about, say, a beautiful Stephen Willett's work that made me cry about old people living on their own in council blocks. And I wanted to know, Jeremy, if you had a political aim that was beyond the commemorative, if it was an anti-war statement, or was that an element to it?
So, Jeremy, whether there was a political message beyond just commemorating the war?
Not in a kind of party political way, obviously, but probably, if anything, it was more about maybe what art and theatre is capable of doing rather than being anti-war. I was just trying to push the sort of possibilities of doing a national celebration. So maybe it was political in the fact, but it wasn't. It didn't involve the royal family, it didn't involve a church service or a monument where people go and feel overtly sentimental about something or sad about something. So maybe with a small p, it was trying to redefine what a memorial could be to a war, but it was definitely, I wouldn't say it was necessarily anti-war as such, but it clearly has that within it. But I don't know if that's really answering your question necessarily. But
Feels like one of the things you said most often when we went on our visits was exactly that, there shouldn't be any sentimentality about it, and that the lack of narrative also felt political with a small p, that there was a very small climax at the end of the day, but it was never about telling a story, and it was never about commenting on the characters of these men. It was a more oblique statement than that.
But of course, when you work in the public realm with the public, they bring their own interpretation of something. So they could have built something quite sentimental. I'm sure some people did, but I wasn't looking for that. I was looking for something slightly more shocking or surprising. I think that's what I was hoping for.
And they actively avoided any war memorials or churches or anything that had that kind of feeling about it. Much more to do with IKEA or
Westfield Shopping Centre and stuff,
And some of the places where they would have gathered they'd be at the front, but they would have gathered there as they were going to the front, train stations.
Yeah. But I really wanted to go to contemporary places and look odd and look out of place and strange and maybe even unsettling. To have it go through Westfield or in a Tesco's car park or something. That's what I wanted them to be.
So, wars seem so far away and distant, and I suppose when you have troops serving in Afghanistan and Iraq, they do come home, but that was a great war that affected small towns where everyone was affected. And I think we have time for one right here, yes? And then we'll just take two, and then because we have to be out of here sharp at 1:45, very quickly. Yep. Okay, we're going to just very quickly, 1 second, here, okay, Carol.
As there was such a huge loss from the Commonwealth, in battles like Gallipoli, Australians, people from all around the world who served in this terrible war. Is there going to be a proliferation of your creative work around the world?
Interesting.
Just based
here? Just
that's not up for me, really. If people want to repeat it as a project, like I was saying earlier, they can. But it might happen.
New Zealand has asked them already, but the question was whether in Commonwealth countries they might want to recreate it. And yes, here.
A much more mundane question, I'm afraid, politics or anything like that. I'm
That's the real enemy.
Jen.
And how they got the trains to run on time that day. Yes, I mean that. So how did you get permission from Network Rail? And how did you keep it secret? So many people were involved, yeah.
Sorry, so all the permissions, so someone here that could tell you if she wants to speak, but she might not want to speak. This is Jen who did.
Jen Crook.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear a bit more about that side of the project. Okay, that's a lot of... Jen, you start with the thing.
Okay, so
Network Rail.
Permissions-wise, we were lucky actually that Network Rail had some association already with 1418 Now, so we had a good link there. But permissions-wise, we were kind of playing a fine line between asking for permission and begging for forgiveness. So there were some key people we went to that we knew we had to, big railway stations where we had the convergences, but we tried to not tell many people about it at all. So, it was really limited in terms of who we got permission from. What was the other part?
Stage management. Can I just say the only place in the UK where we were denied access was Canary Wharf. Yeah. And if I'd have thought about it and known that beforehand, I would just said, just go there. Don't ask these idiots. Just do it. I mean,
they would have been
we had like several tiers of information. So for people like Network Rail, we brought them in quite early on to the whole project. But others, we would just tell them really limited stuff, like someone will turn up in a costume on this day. So there's absolutely no sort of revealing information. But in terms of the stage management, we were working, as you were saying, with 27 partners around the country, all of whom had amazing teams, amazing stage managers, and they were all amazing at kind of dealing with the route planning in their own locations. So I think it was something like 900 places that we went to in total, and all of that was done regionally. So we were sort of guiding from here, if you like, but a lot of that work was done by those teams on the ground. And same with the volunteer management. There were some incredibly enthusiastic salespeople, really, who went out into community groups, shopping centres, sort of every single community that you can imagine. There was a team of people going out there and trying to persuade them to get involved with something where they knew nothing about what they were going to be signing up for. And that's what was really remarkable when we went round on all the visits, was seeing what people had walked through the door to without even knowing what they were taking part in. It was incredible.
Good. And question secrecy, you mentioned a bit, Jenny, you were watching online to make sure any words came out that you'd shut them down. Just very quickly, was there any other measures you had to use, or Rufus and Emily, to make sure nobody...
Court marshals.
Yeah, because that's also partially connected to the volunteers question. Everyone mustn't bursting to tell their girlfriend, their boyfriend, their mother.
The volunteers were amazing. They all had to sign a confidentiality agreement, after which they were told more details about the project. But we took a lot of inspiration from the Olympics opening ceremony and this idea that if people buy into a secret with you, they can really own that secret. And I don't know if you guys would agree, but I think from what we saw, the incredible participants just went, this is ours. We understand Jeremy's vision. We understand why the secrecy is completely fundamental to that. And we're going to own that and enjoy that.
But just keeping them off social media was pretty extraordinary. I think the theatres do have this, the network of the 27 theatres have amazing learning and participation teams as well as amazing stage management teams, and they used all the knowledge that they've built up over years and years to put into effect on this project. And I think that buying in and keeping a secret was pretty extraordinary. The other organisation that did that actually was the BBC. So your organisation, Lyse, there was a small team led by Jonty, who is here, which kept it a secret from all their colleagues, but somehow managed to get Regions and Nations TV, local radio, Radio 1, social media, Scotland, Northern Ireland, incredible coverage. And one of the reasons I think that we were able to get to so many people in the country was the Regions and Network news, regional news of the BBC. So from between 6:30 and 7, they played out the films that they'd been recording all day, just following the routes of the soldiers, and they were the very few people that we let into the secret.
Good. I have to say, in more than 30 years with the BBC, was the first time ever I've been asked to sign a secrecy agreement. So so they said some big cultural figure, and I thought, is it Beyonce? Is it Madonna? Who's demanding secrecy?
Well, in Plymouth,
we do.
Plymouth, they knew there was an artist involved, and the guys in Plymouth thought it was Kanye West was doing it.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking this great creative team for what you did create for all of us. And a thank you to all of you who were part of the creation. Thank you very much.